Thierry de Lesquet, Secretary General of the European Landowners Organization. How do you see the balance between managing to provide enough food for all of the people that we're expecting there to be in the world by 2050 and the need to conserve the land and prevent its degradation?
Well, I think they are deeply coupled. There is a deep interrelation between providing enough food and even more in the future and keeping the land in the best condition possible, because the land is the capital. If you don't take care of the land, if you don't keep the best level of biodiversity, you will not be able to produce anything in the future. So it's really the way to maintain the production capacity of the European farms, to be deeply concerned by this best biodiversity level possible.
But how do we do that, given that people are saying we need intensive farming if we're to produce the sorts of volumes of food that we're going to need?
Well, that's a very good question. Well, of course, we need to go over the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution is today at an end, and we need, therefore, to go to the next step, and the next step is the use of new technologies. It's a political debate, and we will see what we will be allowed to use as new technologies. But we will not avoid using new technologies toward the future. So we want to take the advantage of our excellent climate and of the capacity, the ability of our farmers to produce reasonable amounts. So they need the techniques, and they need to have access to those techniques.
We do need, there's some competition for land. We're going to need to maximize the amount that's in food production, if you like, and yet at the same time, food production is competing with the biofuel production, for instance.
You're quite right, but it's a third competition also with nature areas. And I think what we have to do is to, first of all, recognize that we have to produce our food and our biofuels eventually on the best lands, and that we have, of course, to dedicate, let's say, some land of some land which are not at the same level of production capacity to other purpose. Now, when we are tackling biofuels, we also have to recognize that we cannot produce every kind of biofuels. We have to think about the cost efficiency of the biofuels in environmental impact terms and also in terms of challenging the food production. So we have to be rather careful and make the wise choice of biofuels. I will say that some biofuels will be inadequate, and we have to be extremely careful and cautious with the objective of the 20% promoted by the European Union, because if we are growing biofuels everywhere, we will harm and the food capacity and the biodiversity. So we need to establish a fair balance between the three goals.
The Common Agricultural Policy is up for renewal or reform in 2013. There's a lot of talk about needing to make the production of food sustainable. How can that be done, given the sorts of numbers of people who are talking about 9 billion by 2020, possibly 10 billion by 2050?
Well, it's, first of all, we have to make a political decision. Do we have as an objective at European level to feed the world or not? And this is not very clear if you listen to the different participants, to the political debate. But we are deeply convinced that it is our job, the job of the farmers from the temperate countries to do this. And therefore, we do believe that we can do it by accessing new technologies, by improving the environment, and by delivering the ecosystem services. This is the only way. If we take into consideration the service of the ecosystem and we put those services in relation with productive agriculture, we can do it if we got a clear framework for doing it, which means that the first question is what kind of budget, what kind of ambition the European Union will have for the next few years.
President Sarkozy has suggested that perhaps he and France, the French government, will be more flexible this time in terms of the reform of the CAP. In return, though, he wants to see European standards applied to imported food products. I mean, that's something which is going to find the EU in conflict with the WTO.
Oh, absolutely. And every time I'm going to conferences overseas in the US or, let's say, in South America, they accuse us to want to export our cross-compliance. that would change quite a lot the conditions of importation. And I know this is a long-old claim from farmers from the European Union, saying we want to play in the same in the same game. We want to be faced with the same rules our competitors from Brazil or from Argentina or from the US. But it would be a real challenge with the WTO rules anyway.
We do have obviously the problem of climate change too, and that is a growing problem, something which people are becoming increasingly aware of. How do you see that impacting on farming itself within the EU, but also on policy making?
Well, let's first tackle the impact on farming. In the northern part, it will be well, farmers will be able to cope with that. It means that we might have an increase of 2 degrees, which maybe will facilitate the job of the farmers in the northern part. In the southern part, they will have to deal with drought mainly, and maybe some concentration of rain at sometimes, which means that they will have to get access to some technologies like seeds resistant to drought, of maybe having a better use of nitrates than the actual one. But this is what Bhagwati was discussing with us this morning, saying where we have to look into that and we have to make sure we can access to these new technologies. Otherwise, we will not be able to feed the world. Now, the second question, what about the political framework? Well, there's quite a debate, because for the time being, civil society at the level of the European Union is not accepting the new technologies at this position. I don't say that there will be no alternative new technologies, but the one we know today are not accessible. And he said a bit provocatively yesterday evening with some colleagues that, well, if we still need more experience, we have a very wide experience worldwide about those technologies, because until today they are growing on a yearly basis about 132 million hectares of new technology crops. Well, without any accidents, there's a reason to be careful, and there's a reason to apply the precautionary principle. But we should sometimes get out precaution above precaution, and in addition to new precaution, we need to be able to do our job.
In 2007, only 1% of the land under genetically modified crops was actually within the EU. I mean, we've got a lot of catching up to do, haven't we? America has something like 55% of it.
Exactly, absolutely. And there's a very little improvement. Now there is one potato being accepted by the European Commission, and you can see immediately that some countries are speaking about putting a moratorium on this, or saying, well, we don't like because this is not really our tradition. Well, we are in the world of subsidiarity. Well, let's leave subsidiarity functioning, and we cannot impose such crops to the general public if the general public is unconfident with that. But at the other hand, well, there is also a need to explain better and to make sure the acceptance could be reached and could be integrated by the public.
In fact, of course, this potato that's been accepted, the Amflora, produced by BASF, is for industrial purposes. It's for a particular kind of starch, and only that kind of starch. Is that significant, and do you think it could actually, if you like, open the door very slowly, perhaps, towards more public acceptance?
I think so, but you know, there is another potato, GM potato, which will come in the next few months on the market, not on the market, but in the pipeline of the demand, is the one resistant to blight. Well, in terms of environmental impact, I'm a farmer, I'm growing potatoes, I know the impact of my spray on potatoes, and if I can reduce this impact by having a potato being resistant to the blight, I would be, of course, delighted, because I know that I would have a positive action on the environment. But everybody has to understand that there is a positive action. If scientists say this is, of course, reliable, and if scientists say that there is no danger. So we need two criteria. We need science to tell us that there is no danger, and we need, of course, a general acceptance. Otherwise, we are missing what we are trying to do.